Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. When the new Homeowner Association president Karen moved in last month, I knew we were going to have problems. She seemed friendly enough at first, always waving and saying hi, but it didn't take long for her inner Karen to emerge. The first incident happened about 2 weeks after she moved in. I was washing my car in the driveway on a sunny Saturday afternoon when I heard that shrill voice shouting from across the street. "Excuse me! You're not allowed to do that in your driveway! It's against the homeowner association rules!" I looked up to see Karen glaring at me with her hands on her hips. "I'm sorry, what? I've lived here for years and have always washed my car in the driveway," I responded, confused. "Well, I'm the new homeowner association president and it's prohibited. The soap and water will run into the street and cause problems," she huffed. I tried to explain that I wasn't using soap, just hosing off the dirt, but she wouldn't listen. "Rules are rules. Take it to a car wash from now on," she scolded before marching back inside. I shook my head in disbelief. This was just the beginning of Karen's crusade to enforce her interpretation of every minor homeowner association rule. Over the next few weeks, she constantly harassed me and other neighbors over the most ridiculous infractions. My welcome mat was apparently half an inch too big. My trash cans were left out 5 minutes too long after pickup. My grass was a quarter-inch too tall. No matter how politely I tried to address her concerns, she always resorted to threats and condescension. "If you don't comply, I'll have no choice but to issue fines," became her favorite phrase. The final straw came when I returned from work one day to find an official homeowner association violation notice taped to my front door. She was fining me $100 because my mailbox post needed repainting. I saw red. This was just a tiny spot of chip paint. There was no way I was paying this ridiculous fine. Finally, having enough of her harassment, I decided to fight back. I reread the homeowner association bylaws to make sure I knew them inside and out. Then I started watching and waiting for Karen to slip up. It didn't take long. The very next week, I noticed her putting out her trash cans at 6 p.m. the night before pickup. Aha! The bylaws clearly stated cans could not be put out before 7 p.m. I took photos of her violation for evidence. The next day, I typed up an official notice citing the relevant bylaw. With a smile, I walked over and taped it to her front door. A taste of her own medicine? Well, she lost it when she found that notice. She came storming over to my house, face red with anger. "How dare you fine me? I'm the president," she shouted. I calmly explained that rules apply to everyone and quoted the exact bylaw she violated. "If you don't pay the fine, I'll have no choice but to escalate this," I said, throwing her own words back at her. She sputtered threats about getting lawyers involved before whirling around and leaving in a huff. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But I knew this was just the opening skirmish in what would likely be a long war over the homeowner association rules. I had to get the other neighbors on my side. I started talking to all the other homeowners she had been harassing with ridiculous fines over minor issues. It didn't take much to convince them to stand together against her craziness. We came up with a plan. Every time Karen violated a rule, one of us would report her and insist she pay the fine. United, we could fight back against her selective enforcement of the bylaws. For the next few weeks, Karen received constant citations for her hypocritical rule-breaking. She left holiday decorations up too long. She failed to submit an architectural request before repainting her shutters. Her grass exceeded the maximum height. Each time she argued and fought the fines, but we wouldn't back down, and each time we included her written citations as evidence. She had no defense against her own pedantic words. We could tell it was taking a toll on her. She became more and more agitated and reclusive. We also started a lobbying effort to prevent her from being re-elected at the next homeowner association meeting. It all came to a head one Saturday morning when I opened my door to get the newspaper. There was Karen tearing through my flower beds and bushes in a frenzy. I yelled at her to stop, but she ignored me. By the time the police arrived, she had destroyed thousands of dollars worth of landscaping. Of course, I pressed charges for the vandalism. The police also notified Karen that she would face a very steep fine from the homeowner association per the bylaws against destructive behavior. At her court date, the judge ordered her to pay for all the damages and take anger management classes. But the ultimate punishment was barring her from ever serving on an homeowner association board again. We celebrated her removal at the next homeowner association meeting and elected a new board focused on cooperation, not petty citations. No more Karen rule in our neighborhood. With our community united, we could finally relax and return to normal life without constant harassment over mailbox height and grass length. The new board concentrated on things that really mattered, like arranging neighborhood watch and a block party. As for Karen, we heard she had to sell her house just to pay the fines and lawsuit costs against her. I almost felt bad seeing the for sale sign go up. Almost. But I knew our neighborhood was better off without her brand of crazy. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire when dealing with an insane homeowner association president on a power trip. But in the end, the good neighbors will prevail over any entitled Karens trying to rule through intimidation. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Cast me, Karen =, co-parent, kid =, daughter. This story takes place a few years after our breakup and the settlement of our house. We have had 2 years of 50-50 custody of our daughter, 1 week on, 1 week off. Handover is on Monday after school. This is good, as I avoid seeing Karen most weeks. On one of my weeks, the kid comes down with a stomach flu on Thursday, both ends like a volcano. This carried through to Saturday, and on Sunday, she was tired but had no symptoms. I kept her home on Monday to ensure she is 48 hours symptom-free before sending her to school. I dropped the kid off at Karen's, informing her she had a stomach flu, but she should be fine for school tomorrow. Without asking any additional questions, she utters a sound I've only heard camels make before closing the door, rude. But anyway, 3 days go by, and I get a call from Karen. Karen, kid is lactose intolerant. You need to get special milk. Me, where is this coming from? Karen, she had ice cream last night and threw up 45 minutes later. I spoke to my hair and beauty teacher, who said she must be lactose intolerant. Now it's time to mention my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, is a qualified and practicing dietitian and is listening to this call as I put it on speaker. Wife, I really don't think so. Lactose intolerance mainly affects the bowels. Kid had gastro last week. The body will often reject dairy foods for 1-2 weeks post-gastro. If symptoms continue after 3 weeks, then it's something to look into. She went on to explain the science behind this, but I'll spare you the details. My wife said that she cannot make a formal diagnosis, as that requires specific costly tests, but she can refer and treat such conditions. She said it's her professional opinion, as these symptoms are sudden and presented around the same time as gastro. It's gastro-related dairy avoidance. Karen, you're not a doctor. Kid is lactose intolerant, and if you don't comply with the treatment, I'll report you to Child Protection. I thought for a second and said, okay, I'll make you a deal. You get the formal diagnosis and I'll fund the full cost of the test. If it comes back negative, I'm not paying a cent. Hearing this, my wife smiled. Karen, so I pay for the test, and when I get the diagnosis, you will pay me back the full amount. Me, yup, including flights and accommodation. Karen agreed to this deal. I texted her this for written evidence, and she replied with, okay. A few weeks go by and the kid tells me, Mummy is taking me to Melbourne for tests. I get to go on a plane, yay. It's a good time to note that week. The kid was having milk with her breakfast, and surprise, surprise, no problems. Another 4 weeks go by and Karen calls me. Karen, so the test results came back negative. The specialist said it was probably gastro-related issues. Nothing that we could have seen coming, but at least now we know. Anyway, the flights cost me $600. Accommodation was $150, tests were $750, so you owe me half, which is $900. Me, firstly, my wife, who treats conditions like this, said it was gastro-related. You refused to listen, stating we are not doctors, but apparently your hair and beauty teacher is a qualified doctor, eh? Secondly, $600, $150, $750 equals $1,500, half of which is $750, not $900, which brings me to my main point. We agreed that if the test was negative, I wasn't going to pay a cent. You agreed. I hung up, sent her a screenshot of our agreement, including her okay response. The next one is a petty revenge story. This was about 23 years ago. My husband was lousy at giving gifts. He would get what he wanted for himself. That year, I came home to a large box wrapped up about 10 days before Christmas, and he said it was for me. He was so excited. Mind you, we have always been pretty broke, so we, or should I say I, always bought for our children and his greedy family, Mill demands. We always did without. For some reason, I wasn't that excited about this gift. Intuition. Well, Christmas Eve comes and we open gifts. He gets all excited, telling me that I'm going to love this present. I open the box to find a shop vac. We had hardwood and linoleum, so I always swept and mopped and had no need for it. He told me that it is wonderful because it cleans up the garage, his domain, even picks up water, and he said it worked great because he already tried it before wrapping it up. I was pissed. He bought it for himself. I would have been happy with a $5 necklace that turned my neck green. That night, I wouldn't even go to bed with him. He comes into the living room where I was laying down at and told me to come to bed. I told him I wouldn't because I couldn't look at him. He then tells me how I was extremely selfish because gifts were to be what we as a family could use, not what we would want. I laid there all night and plotted my revenge. I had to wait for a year, but like they say, best served cold. I kept quiet and told nobody of my plan for revenge. 50 weeks later, I found it. I wasn't even looking for it, but it was staring right at me as to say, here I am, and it is time. It was in a huge box. I quickly purchased the gift, got some wrapping paper for it, and hid it. Didn't want any sneaky Pete's. Christmas Eve, while he was at work, I put the present under the tree, took 2 rolls of cheap wrapping paper, and I put some ribbon and a bow on it. It also had a nice weight for it. We start opening gifts, and I wait a bit. Finally, his eyes light up seeing this big box and finding out it was his. He was so excited, and I told him that this is specially bought for him. He opens the box to find a case of toilet paper. I then quoted him. Christmas was not for what we would want, but what we as a family need or could use. We all wipe. He was furious. He complained to his brothers and everyone. My family and his brothers told him that he deserved the toilet paper. To this day, no husband in my family will ever buy a vacuum cleaner for their wives as gifts. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Story from quite a few years ago from when I was a bartender in a corporate-style cookie-cutter restaurant. I mostly worked nights, but had one regular mid-shift on Fridays. We were always super busy at the bar for lunch on Fridays and usually had quite a few of the mall workers coming in to eat then head back to work. Nearly every Friday, the same smug, borderline rude lady came in for lunch. Every time she paid exact change, 0 tip. Maybe half the time she would complain over some minor inconvenience, and more than a few times got a comped meal. The more I had to wait on her, the more indignant and pissed off I got. So around Christmas time, I was out and about in the mall buying for family and friends. Picked out something nice for my girlfriend at the time, a sheer top, which I thought would look amazing on her. Decently priced with it being on sale too. Walking up to the cashier, I was a bit surprised to run into resting idiot face. Whatever. In street clothes, I felt like she barely registered who I was, or maybe she really didn't care who was at her register, maybe both. So I handed her a $20 bill. She examined it for a moment, turned it over twice, held it up to the light even. Then out came the counterfeit pen marker. Thinking to myself, a bit excessive, no? Change should have been around $1 and change. Surprisingly, she handed out $81 plus change. She called the next in line, so I stepped to the side for a moment in contemplation. I could honestly feel the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other. Took me a moment or two, but I finally let my moral compass win and stepped back in front of the register. I nicely explained that there was a mistake made, but before I could continue, she shot me down and briskly told me, in a semi-professional tone, to GTFOH. So I did. The way I look at it, all those lost tips and the money she just gifted me was just karma. Sucked to be her, I guess. The next one is an entitled people story. So a few months ago I had a bachelorette trip to Puerto Rico. 2 of my bridesmaids were able to go and my mother and sister came as well. I asked my mom to be the maid of honor since I thought it would help create a closer bond between us while getting ready for my wedding. My whole goal was to have everyone get along and just have a good time. I should have known this was going to be a disaster. A couple of weeks before, my mother started criticizing all of my bridesmaids/friends, with a particular focus on one who was actually going on the trip. I ended up paying for my mom, sister, and my own flight to help ease the burden on my mom, who would have had to pay for both her and my sister. The plan was for my mother to pay for her and my sister's hotel. My friend reached out to everyone to try and plan something for me without me getting involved. I would like to add that I planned the bachelorette trip as the bride. When my friend reached out to my mom and called her, She wanted to help as much as she could. My friend is actually Puerto Rican, so she was going to be a huge help with this trip. At the time, I did not know about this call. My mother called me at 3 a.m. after having that call with my friend that day to tell me she had not been fulfilling her maid of honor duties because she was observing everyone and everything. She then said, as the maid of honor, she should be planning the bachelorette trip. I found this conversation odd, but I said okay. I was relieved that she finally stepped up to help me with the trip. My mom did say before the call ended not to tell my friend she talked to me about this, which I did find odd as well. The next day, my friend called me and told me that she wanted to make sure that I had a great bachelorette trip to remember, and it should be all about me. She wanted to help me with the excursions I wanted to do, and I told her my mom wanted to plan as well so they could work together. I saw my mother the next day, and she went on a rant that my friend was disrespectful and said she was not letting a little girl control her on this trip. She made it seem like something was wrong with my friend and how she did not want to wear her stupid t-shirts during the trip. She started raging and telling me she didn't want to go in the rental car with my friend and wanted to take an Uber. Her words were, "Your friend is disrespectful, and I will beat this idiot ass." This automatically started stressing me out. She said she didn't like my friend and she was disrespectful and had mental issues. I ended up calling my friend and asking her if she could cancel the rental, but she said she could not. I created a group chat for the ones attending the trip, and my friend was asking questions about the activities we were going to do and how excited she was, but my mom and sister were instantly annoyed. My mom was supposed to plan the activities that we were going to do in Puerto Rico. She refused to let my friend do it or participate in helping, even though my friend is Puerto Rican. Fast forward to the first day of the bachelorette trip. When we arrived, my mom's luggage was missing, and it had all of her toiletries. She was upset about it. When we got to the hotel, I let everyone rest since it was an early flight. My friend got there a little later in the day, and I met up with her and my other friend in the lobby. I called my mom and sister to meet us downstairs so we could go with them to replace the toiletries that were lost and have dinner. As my two friends and I were waiting, my mom came downstairs and stood behind my Puerto Rican friend and said hi to her so quietly that she could not hear her. I hinted to her that my mom was standing over and behind her while she was sitting on the lobby couch, which I thought was weird. She turned around and said hello. My mom instantly just said, "Okay, I am leaving now. Go be with your friends." She literally ran off. My sister did not say a word. When I tell you the energy was so off, you could cut the tension in the air with a knife. I asked my friend what was going on with her and my mom because something just felt really off. She told me she did not really know her, so she did not understand why. I decided to just go to the bar with my friends and wait for my mom and sister to get back. 5 minutes later, I got a text from my mom saying, "Shame on you. You betrayed your family. You chose a nobody over your own family. I'm disappointed, and your sister and I are out of the wedding." I responded and said that I did not, and asked what the problem was. I was then ignored. I started crying hysterically because I did not want my bachelorette to be like this. My friends tried to cheer me up and took me out to dinner. I decided to let things cool off and try to smooth things over in the morning with my mom and sister. I went to my mom and sister's room and knocked on the door several times and kept going back to knock on the door. I also called each of them, and there was no answer. I even waited around the lobby to see if I ran into them, but nothing. I called both of them again later in the afternoon, and finally my sister picked up. I asked if they were okay and if we could squash whatever happened and move forward with the plans. I asked why they did not answer me for hours, and they said they were sleeping, which I knew was a lie because I heard someone look through the peephole when I knocked earlier. My sister said they are not doing any of the activities that I wanted to do and that they were having lunch, but would not tell me where they were. I felt terrible. My mom planned nothing that she said she was going to plan. My friend even texted and reached out to my mom and apologized for whatever my mom thought she did and called, but my mom did not answer. My friend scrambled and tried to make the best of the rest of the trip for me, while my mom and sister were MIA. The day before we had to leave and go home, my sister reached out to get their plane tickets, which I had purchased. I sent them, and I was immediately upset. My mom asked me to put my credit card down for her and my sister's hotel and said she would pay me back. I honestly think that she had no intention of paying me back because she is my mother. They ignored me during the entire trip and now demanded their plane tickets. I decided to change my flight and leave earlier. I couldn't sit on the plane with my mom and sister and act like this was normal. My sister called and asked if I was going to get an Uber to the airport, and I told her no, I have a different flight. My mom finally appeared and called me and said so many hurtful things. My mom told me I was always disloyal, how I interpreted everything wrong, I overthink, I don't care about her and my sister, how I was feeling is wrong, and called me a liar and hung up in my face. My friend started to tell me about the phone conversation that she had with my mom prior. She didn't want to tell me out of respect for my mother because my mom asked her not to tell me about the phone conversation. My friend said my mom was talking badly about me, my fiance's family, and how I was planning my wedding. My friend was put in this awkward position. Ever since that trip, I have not spoken to my mom or sister, and they did not show up to my wedding. I only get a text from my sister to tell me to pay both her and my mom's phone bill once a month, and that is it. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look, "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that?" "Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.